All right, we are going to move into our keynote portion, sponsored by Bend Broadband, who is honored to sponsor PubTalk and proud to be a part of the Central Oregon community. Check out bendbroadband.com. They have a great new introductory offer for business internet starting at $39.95 when bundled. That is a screaming deal. And Central Oregon Association of Realtors. Your business may look a bit different these days, but the expertise realtors have not changed. Realtors have the same dedication to connect with clients and continue to find new ways to share their expertise. So if you have questions, look for the R to indicate the member of the Central Oregon Association of Realtors. Keynote Kara. Throughout Kara Buckley's career, she has worked across the highest levels of sport, including the Olympic Games, Paralympic Games, FIFA World Cup, League of Legends, Special Olympics, and UEFA Champions League. With LA 28, the home of the 28th Summer Olympic and Paralympic Games, and the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic team, she built and launched the first of its kind athlete marketing program. While working at Visa, she pioneered Visa's Rio 2016 acceptance campaign by supporting 10 athletes competing on the refugee Olympic team. Joining us from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, as well as Oregon Sports Angels, here is Kara Buckley to talk with us about sports at the intersection of impact and innovation. Take it away, Kara. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks very much for having me, and I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of you in person soon. I am a native Oregonian, born and raised in Portland, went to the University of Oregon, and just had the opportunity right before COVID actually to move back to Oregon. Was working remote and got to choose where I live, and couldn't imagine a better place to come than Bend. So I've really enjoyed being here this last year, almost year and a half now at this stage, and I feel very lucky to be able to do what I'm doing professionally here in Bend as well. So today I want to talk about my background and how I ended up here in Bend, and something that's really important to me, which is this philosophy that you've likely heard before, this idea that talent is distributed, but opportunity typically is not. And so I hope that you'll see over the course of my career, that is one of my goals, is to increase access to opportunity. And I hope that, through this momentum we have with remote work and opportunities being distributed, that we can continue to take advantage of that here in Bend. I also want to start by saying, there are some questions around what sport and startups have in common. And I would say that I'm a sucker for work ethic. I believe in the value of sweat equity, and the things that I do professionally, I try to rise to the level of the athletes that I have the pleasure of working with. So with that, I want to start with a story. 5 years ago, in the spring of 2016, I found myself in Berlin, in Germany. And if you've ever been to Germany, if you've ever been to Berlin, there's a huge Olympic park, the Olympia Stadium. And this is the Olympic Stadium that was built in 1936 to host the Olympic Games right before World War II, and the site of the very first live TV broadcast that was ever done, which was done from the Olympics. So I traveled to Berlin for a work trip, and I found myself walking into this massive concrete spread that feels very much like a low and drawn out weight of a city, kind of like, a Washington, D.C. or a Beijing, where there's just these iconic towers of architecture and these very heavy sense of just history. And I actually walked right up to this stadium, and then I took a left. And I took a left to walk into the swimming park where the national German Olympians train. And in that swimming park at this time were a number of Syrian refugees who were on the national Syrian swimming team and who had, in the prior year, escaped from Syria and traveled to Germany to seek refugee status. When I walked into the swimming club, I sat down at a cafe, and I met a woman named Yusra Mardini, who you might remember seeing as the face of the refugee Olympic team back in 2016 in Rio. And I sat with her, and I met her father and her family, and I heard their story. And their story is pretty interesting and unique. Yusra at the time was 16. She had a cell phone and was like any teenage girl. I'm there trying to get her to sign a Visa sponsorship deal, and she's more interested in her phone and swimming, of course. And she told me her story of what she had been through just a year prior in 2015. And her story at that time was something that was very common among 1 million refugees that had landed in Germany after leaving Syria. And what was amazing, there might be a guest speaker in the background, a 3-year-old who really wants to say hi. What was amazing about Yusra's journey is the welcoming nature that she felt when she got to Germany. You know, just to give you a sense of her story, she left Syria in the summer of 2015 with her sister Sarah, who's 2 years older, and it was just the two of them, the two 16 and 18-year-old girls. Their mother and father and younger sister, who was 5 years old, could only afford to send two people from the family to escape from Syria, and so they chose to send the 2 daughters first. The 2 daughters competed and trained on the national team in Syria, and they told me stories about how when they were training and bombs would fall through where they were training in the swimming pool in Syria before they left. And then when they left Syria, they went on a month-long journey that took them all the way across Europe. And their story was pretty famous for the fact that when they boarded a boat in Turkey, and it was full of 20 people in an inflated boat, and it started sinking as they crossed over into Greece. And so the 2 sisters actually had to swim this boat to shore. Where they had landed in Germany gave them the opportunity to continue swimming. And so Yusra at that time had her eye on competing in Rio. And she was still hoping to qualify. She ended up qualifying a couple months later, and we ended up shooting a commercial with her to talk about her story. And my role at the time was leading Visa's Olympic and Paralympic athlete sponsorships. And we were telling the stories of acceptance, right? A lot of sponsorships will try to bridge these, product benefits that are very rational, like the acceptance of a card, using the ability to pay with a phone or a card, with the emotional benefit of acceptance, right? And so her story was one that we wanted to elevate and talk about what it meant to be accepted. It was an amazing experience to be with her in Rio a couple months later, when she and the other 9 Olympians that she competed with actually walked out with a flag right before Brazil came out during the opening ceremonies. You might remember this moment on TV. And it was just a fantastic experience to be able to provide access to opportunities like sponsorship deals to people who had been through unimaginable things. I want to kind of backtrack from there and share a little bit more about how I got to be in that position of signing the deal and supporting these refugee Olympians. And that story starts in Portland. I was born and raised in Portland in Beaverton, Oregon, just a couple miles from the Nike campus. And I think at the time I underestimated what my environment kind of contributed in terms of, what I ended up going to do later in life. But as I was growing up, I started babysitting for families. And I remember when I was 13, I babysat for a family where the father was a creative director at Wieden & Kennedy. And you might remember this from the mid-90s, but Tiger Woods was in an ad where he was bouncing a golf ball on a golf club. And this dad, I babysat his kids, he showed me a rough cut of this film, and it kind of opened my eyes. I was 13, terrible athlete, like tried every sport under the sun. My dad is a ski race instructor and was like devastated. Like, you'll see me on the bunny slope at Bachelor, but that's about it. But I loved sport. I loved being outside and active and social. And this was an eye opener to me that you could actually build a career around something that was so positive, and work with people that valued similar things. And so I remember this moment in my life where I said, I want to do this, and I want to be the mom with a job like this, right? And that was like an anchoring moment for me. I ended up graduating from University of Oregon, and then again, undervalued my background in Oregon. All I wanted to do was get out of Oregon. So I moved out to Connecticut. I worked for a company called Octagon for 4 years, a sports marketing company, where I had the opportunity to consult in sports marketing and go to a number of international events. And one of which that was on my radar at the time was in 2009, while I was working at Octagon, the Rio 2016 Games were awarded to Brazil. So there was this moment on my radar where I knew the World Cup had been awarded in 2014, and in 2016, the Games were also going to Brazil. And so I started learning Portuguese. I'm kind of an insatiably curious person and kind of a geek for foreign languages. So I spent the next 7 years learning Portuguese and was able to moved back to the West Coast and worked for Visa for 5 years, where I went to the World Cup in 2014 and led marketing programs for Visa's global campaigns, and then was lucky enough to go back in 2016 and support the Olympic and Paralympic athletes that we sponsored at Visa. And I think, I believe in taking that extra step. Learning Portuguese meant that I could go down and I could sit at the table with the Rio organizing committee, and I could actually, not just assume that they would speak my language, but negotiate a contract and give a presentation in their language. And that went like a really long ways towards building relationships. After Rio, I was married the year before, and my husband and I reached a point where we said, we don't have kids yet. This is the time if we want to be selfish. We were still living in San Francisco, but we did a bit of a drop mic, and we traveled until my son was born. And when we got back to San Francisco, we were exploring kind of like that next phase. And I joined a group, which I think is a model we should talk about bringing to Bend. It's a group that was called South Park Commons. And this is where my experience in sport really intersected with innovation. So South Park Commons was started by a woman here in the top left, Ruchi, who was the first female engineer at Facebook. She wrote the code for the newsfeed. And then she had a second successful exit after she sold her company to Dropbox pretty early on. And so she started this community called SPC, or South Park Commons, with the mindset of like bringing together, intellectually curious people who wanted to launch their next venture. And it started out really as a community. If you know San Francisco and like the venture scene, there's this tiny little park in the middle of the city called South Park. And it is this like idyllic area where every venture fund is spotted around with a beautiful office. And one of those offices was the office that Ruchi opened, with South Park Commons. She brought together some fascinating people, largely engineers that she had worked with, and then started getting into kind of other industries. And her whole mission was about bringing together people to explore and launch, risky ventures. And South Park's model has basically three different components. One is this community where people work out of the office. There's talks, there's academic research groups, people writing books and publishing, and then also building and launching companies. But it's a community in a space where people have a long-term ability to kind of plant roots and dig into what they want to do next. The second thing that South Park did is raise a fund. So $60 million fund that actually funds companies that start in the community and also outside of the community to promote seed stage investments. And that's where I really started getting connected with companies and learning more about angel investing and what it was like to start a company and go from 0 to 1. And where they've taken it is this third category, which is not 0 to 1, but the -1 to 0, which is before you have an idea, before you have a company, they invest in people now in kind of a pre-seed stage, which says, we will give you the bandwidth for a couple of years to explore. And then we believe in you and your track record. We want to help you launch your next venture. So it was a pretty cool model. And while I was at SPC, there were some funny connections back to sport. So you might recognize the person on the left here who's a Bend native. Ashton Eaton was an athlete that I was fortunate to work with at Visa when I was there. And after he retired from sport after Rio, he moved to San Francisco. He and his wife moved down, and he really wanted to get into engineering and the startup scene. So he actually joined South Park Commons. So he gave talks about what it was like to go compete and earn a gold medal versus a world record, and what it was like to actually progress through the slope of becoming the world's best at something versus the slope of, learning something brand new. And he's insatiably curious. And so I think he really relished in this opportunity to learn from people who had started companies and, split off into different fields and had these, transitions in life like he was going through. The other funny thing that happened is we also had an two-time Olympic gold medalist rower, Aaron Cafaro, and Ashton and Aaron would lead these workouts in the middle of South Park. So you can imagine a group of engineers and a group of world-class athletes working out in the middle of this idyllic little park in the middle of San Francisco. At that stage, I started wanting to get back into sport and had the fortune of joining the US Olympic and Paralympic group to do some consulting remote, which meant that I was in a really lucky position to pick where I could live. And at that stage, my husband was also working remote, and we said, if we could live anywhere, where would we be? And I was really excited to have the opportunity to come back to Oregon and to plant roots in Bend. We have 2 little kids now, and my parents live just a mile away with a playground in the middle. And it's the kind of life that we want to give our kids. I look back at my childhood growing up in Oregon and want to give my kids, you know, the same opportunities and the same kind of outdoor experience and community that I had. And so we got here about maybe a year and a half ago now. And the last year has looked a lot like this. If you guys have small kids, you might know that this looks pretty familiar. We have a 3-year-old and then now a 6-month-old baby. But I do want to just share three of the things I've been working on since I did come back to Bend at the times when it doesn't quite look like this. So the first is with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. I have helped build and launch a new digital marketplace. And we're basically taking a very manual process, which is going through and sponsoring an athlete, and we've digitized the experience. So we have built what we're calling AMP, and it's a private network where Team USA sponsors can actually go on and search for athletes, contact them, sign a contract digitally, and then actually, you know, submit payment and payouts go directly to the athletes' bank accounts. So we're taking the friction out of doing these deals, and we're trying to create more opportunity for athletes. So typically the same 10 or 20 athletes get the bulk of the sponsorship deals. As of today, we have 450 athletes registered to this marketplace, and they're starting to see increased revenue opportunities that they didn't have access to before. It's been pretty cool to build this program and take this idea that we had a little over a year ago and like take advantage of the time we had. I think if Tokyo hadn't been delayed, this would have been a lot harder to do, but we've tried to lean into this extra time with the 1-year delay of the Tokyo Games and build tools that can bring value to both sponsors and to athletes. The other thing that a good friend and mentor convinced me to do over the last year was write a book, which might sound a little bit crazy, but you know, during COVID times, I've really been craving, you know, making local connections and meeting new people. And so what we did is we actually wrote a book on 19 people who have a physical disability. And for me, one out of every 3 athletes that I work with has a physical disability. Between the Olympians and the Paralympians, there's a little over 30% of athletes who have a disability. And so we wrote a book that includes profiles of their stories and their lives. And the motivation was, for me, really, you know, curiosity to learn more about their experiences. And in the process, I think I've been shocked at how much I've learned and how little I really knew before, even though I've worked with a number of Paralympians. So this book is coming out this summer, and we're publishing with Gillette Children's Healthcare, which is a children's hospital. And the goal here is really like twofold. You know, one is for children and young adults who are diagnosed with a physical disability. We hope that this is a book that shows them what's possible. You know, we've interviewed people like Judy Heumann, who was in the movie Crip Camp on Netflix, Ellie Cole, who was part of another Netflix film called Rising Phoenix. You know, we interviewed Jessica Long, who was the face of the Toyota Paralympic ad that displayed at the Super Bowl this year. And we told their stories about what it was like to grow up with a physical disability, and then what it was like to achieve great things in their lives and kind of overcome this stigma. What we found in writing this book is that the numbers and access to opportunity is pretty shocking. These are people without a cognitive disability, purely physical disability. And when you look at the numbers, you know, unemployment rates are double those of a physically abled population, and marriage and childhood rates are also just 1/3 of a physically abled population. And yet the only thing that is contributing to that is stigma. And so the second hope of our book is that we will help change people's minds. What we found is that people are quite often putting people with a physical disability into one of 2 camps, either inspirational or pitied. And one of the people we interviewed put it really well and said, you know, if you wear glasses, you know, or if you wear contacts, you're not inspirational for having vision that is different than somebody else. And I don't feel bad for you, right? You have tools that can help you to see like other people see. And every person we interviewed across the spectrum of disabilities said the same thing, which is I am not inspirational for having a disability. I am inspirational for what I do with my disability and what I do with the cards I'm dealt in life. And so we hope, and I have to say my experience in marketing has opened my eyes into the ways to tell stories about people. And I hope that this book helps open people's eyes to what is possible and how people would like to be perceived and have their stories told. The last thing that I'll share is that I also had the fortune of meeting a woman who I think a lot of you know, Kate Delhagen, who is a former Nike executive. And I read an article about her a year ago. Because of my background working with startups at South Park Commons, I shot her an email and we got on the phone that night last year. And I joined this group called Oregon Sports Angels. And for me, it's been a wonderful way to learn more about the startup scene here in Oregon and then nationally with sports companies, and also get to know other angel investors here in Oregon. I think one of the companies, Biomodem, actually came and won a pitch day here with EDCO. But it's been a really fantastic group to work with, and I've really appreciated that opportunity. I think what I've learned in working with startups and athletes is, that there's a number of philosophies that apply to both. One of my favorites, and when I hire people, is that, I hire for slope, not y-intercept, right? This idea that I want to look for people and invest in people based on the trajectory, not just where they are starting from. I also really believe in what I said at the beginning, which is, while talent is equally distributed, opportunity has not historically been equally distributed. And I'm a big believer in, through startups and through sports, there are opportunities to better distribute those opportunities to everybody. And I think we are at a stage where there's this wonderful momentum behind remote work and distributed access. And I hope, that I can be part of that, and that all of us can help continue to bring those opportunities to Bend. So with that, I'll say thank you and look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Kara. It's just awesome to learn more about your story. And I'm sure that we do have some questions in the audience. Anyone who wants to kick it off? Well, I guess I have a question. How did you like writing your book?
It was fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun. We actually did some, we interviewed everybody on Zoom, did a recording, and so we had a transcript for all the interviews. And so there were a few hacks that helped a lot, like technology. I think my favorite part was just meeting fascinating people. That was great.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. And any questions from the audience? Do I have any questions in the theater?
Yep, we have one in the theater.
Okay.
Hey, Kara, this is Justin Coates. You can find me on LinkedIn. I loved your story. I thought it was awesome. Hearing your passion, working with professional athletes must have been amazing. You are also a professional. It takes grit, it takes time, and it's amazing. I am starting an esport organization, and I didn't hear you talk much about League of Legends and your time there.
Yeah.
How difficult would it be for me to get a conversation with you over coffee sometime?
I am happy to. I'm coming up on second vaccine, so once that's clear, then yeah, I'm happy to. And
hey, me too. I get mine on Sunday.
What's that?
I get mine on Sunday.
Nice. I also kind of wanted to focus a little bit. I joined a board at League of Legends parent company Riot Games to look at how esports is structured globally and how you can take learnings from sport to the way that esports are structured. So I think that's what you're asking about, and I'd be happy to chat.
That would be amazing. How can I reach you?
LinkedIn is probably a great spot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin. All right, any other questions from the audience for Kara tonight? Aaron, anybody online asking questions? Kara, what's been your favorite part of your work? What's been your favorite thing that you've done so far?
I think working with the refugee Olympians would be up there. That was a pretty amazing experience to tie together impact with sport. They're amazing people, and any one of us could be in their situation, and it opened my eyes to kind of the, you know, the way that things are perceived versus the way that people are, right? And I think, you know, we see that on the southern border now with the US, where I think there's a perception versus a reality of what's going on our border. And to hear how wonderful it was for people to feel like they could get to a place that was safe. I think that meant a lot. And then to have that moment of like celebration where refugees were watching each other around the world, that was pretty cool.
Right. I imagine these are like the types of experiences you have that you can't unhave, right? This changes you forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. How amazing. Erin, yes. What is next for you, Kara?
Tokyo is coming up this summer. That is probably the next thing on my radar. Beijing is 6 months after that for the Winter Olympics, so that's coming up fast.
That is so exciting. No big deal. It's just going to the Olympics, you know? It's not really.
We'll see. We'll see who goes.
Right.
Yeah. Athletes are definitely going. That's for sure.
Well, I hope you get the experience that you're hoping for. Do I have any other questions? I don't want to leave anybody behind. Erin, anything from online? So you've already done so much. What is your dream job, Kara?
This working on the Olympics has been my dream job. I feel very lucky to do that. I think a lot about like systems changes, and I think I'm also motivated by things that I see that frustrate me. So I don't know what's next, but I like changing systems, and I would love to change some big systems like healthcare in the U.S., things like that. I don't know what that looks like down the road, but I think there's a potential for some improvement.
Oh, there's definitely some potential for some improvement. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a safe thing. Lots of opportunity, I like to say. Would you ever go into politics?
Maybe. Like, who knows? I don't know. I love people. I love working on hard problems. I'm, married to an engineer who, in his vows said, you're my favorite person to solve problems with, which if you're an engineer, that like means a lot. But I hope to keep working on hard problems and hope to do them here in Bend.
Well, I have to break it to you. I think the average is if people ask you 7 times to run for office, then you'll run. So that's one. And the next time I see you, I'm going to ask again. I think you'd be great. I love that you're seeing the opportunities in every possible place that they might exist. And I really commend you, and I enjoyed your talk very much. So we do have a gift for you. This is our tradition. This is a PubTalk ginormous glass mug. I guess we call it a Stein? Tanker. So we're going to get this to you, Kara, and then you can bring it back, and Brian will fill it up for you at a future Pub Talk. And it was just such an honor and a pleasure to have you. I'm so glad that you all ended up in Bend, and I hope that transition's going really well for you. And please stay in touch with us. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.